Thank you for joining us here on AM Talk. We're talking about the election processes, how far we have come. Yesterday, we witnessed the balloting. Now we know where the parties and the only independent candidate is placed on the ballots. We'll be giving you reminders in the course of this conversation by way of where they are placed. My guests in studio, we're talking about the different angles, the different conversations that have been that has come up because of the balloting yesterday, the different interpretations that have also been put on the placements of the candidates. Mr. Benefsin is poster. He joins us via phone. Also joining us via Zoom is Dr. Stephen Mahama Brima. He's a senior lecturer at the Department of Marketing and Entrepreneurship, the University of Ghana Business School. And in studio is the Member of Parliament for Ikuapem South, also Deputy Local Government Minister, Mr. Obi Amwa. Let me say good morning to you here.
Thank you so much
for joining. Let me say good morning to Dr. Brima via Zoom, if you can hear me, sir. Okay. All right. Let me start with you, Mr. Obi Amwa. Yeah. You're following the process. First of all, your impression about the balloting. What is different about this balloting from the previous ones?
Well, good morning and thank you so much. And then I'll need to thank Multimedia for all that you are doing about the elections. Except that as we go on with this discussion, I will need to bring another angle.
Okay.
To see how you can also assist voter education. It's a very critical thing, so we will talk about it. But so far so good. Even as to who should pick a ballot first, they had to ballot. So we ended up number 4. That we were supposed to be the 4th party, more or less, to pick a ballot, to decide where we will be on the ballot paper. And I checked in 2016, the same thing happened as to who should pick a ballot, etc. and then order. Which the only challenge I had was where two parties were arguing about how many should represent the party at the place. Initially, we knew there were supposed to be 2. So for us, the General Secretary and Director of Elections, others came with more than 2 and a few altercations. But at the end of the day, the ballot was free and fair, and then the whole world was watching, media, civil society, the donor community. So
the NDC Spito Tokono raised some issues.
Like?
So in terms of writing the numbers or placing the numbers on the sheets before balloting, he raised the issue of the whole process being transparent so that let's witness when you're putting the numbers there.
I don't understand it, in the sense that if you're not careful, you rather encourage people to identify which number is which. Ideally, even before they came in, they should have done that thing. If you look at all the balloting, etc., which we normally witness across the world, even typical one in football, they come with balls. So they just rotate the balls and then you pick one. When you pick, you open it, then you see your number in, or you see the team in, then it's placed. So we can even do better than this, but I don't think.
So you don't think that's something that we should pay attention to?
No, what we should pay attention to is to ensure that nobody gets any advantage as to which number he wants to pick. Apart from that, I don't think we should get so much noise about what to pick. In any case, even though if you pick number 1, it makes it easier to market your candidate. And for your parliamentary candidates, they go along. So every candidate for MPP will be number 1. My place, we are only 2 candidates. So I'll be number 1 and then the NEC will be number 2. Across the country, every MPP candidate will be number 1 as our presidential candidate. So of course, for marketing purposes, it becomes easier for us. But in 2016, our candidate was number 5. But we survived. So we still need to do a lot of work, but it's easier to market your candidate if you think, if I'll take you back, we even used to have Asieho because we were last on the ballot. And then when it came to by-election, we were not Asieho anymore. So we had to change the whole strategy to say that Osnuni, Abani, Now it's become part of us that it's more important to say that this is the candidate, the symbol is the elephant. So if you come to my place, when I say Osunye, they will say Nananye. When I say Osunye, they will say Obinye. So that we don't even haggle over where the person is placed. But if it's very favorable, like number one, of course you can add it to your campaign and marketing.
Let me bring in pollster Mr. Benevson, who's joining the conversation via phone. Mr. Benevson, a very good morning to you, if you can hear me. Is placement on the ballot significant in terms of who wins the election?
Good morning to our viewers. I think that the placement will determine how easy it will be to market your candidate. Two, it will make you either lose votes through what I call the unofficial third presidential candidate party called rejected ballots. Because most presidential candidates, the number of rejected ballots always persisted before the other smaller presidential candidates. So the placement has an impact. It makes it easier, and you avoid votes that would have gone to you going to rejected ballots.
You've monitored elections closely. Some are already concerned about the possibility of spoiled ballots because the two candidates people are most likely to vote for are close to each other.
I don't think so. I think that 1 and 2 makes it easier for them in terms of campaigning their presidential and parliamentary candidate, because across board it will be 1 and 2. If one of them, the big two parties, had gone to, let's say, 5 or 6, they would have had problem campaigning for their presidential candidate. Then the parliamentary candidate would have had a problem of saying that vote for number 1, then vote for me at number 5. So fortunately, these two parties have escaped that imbalance and difficulty in marketing their campaigns. But I think that the one makes it easier in terms of majority of Ghanaians understand Twi, Shroho, Aseho. It makes it very easy. But they are fortunate they are close to each other, losing time and resources.
Will this also allow for the other people in between to be easily identified?
No, there's nobody between the two. But
yes, the rest of the candidates after 2.
Yes, it will. It will already be in the last 2 elections, even though you invited me to speak, but as a diplomat, so I'll be a bit blunt. In the last 2 elections, unfortunately, apart from these 2 candidates, the fortunes of their votes have been dwindling. Like in 2000, the other candidates, apart from the 2, got 6.2%. In 2012, there were 8. Apart from the 2 NDC MPP, the 6 candidates got 1.5% of total votes. In 2016, there were 7. The 2 top NDC MPP, apart from the 2, the remaining 5 got 1.75%. So already, apart from 1, 2, they are going to have problems even with their meager support base. They're going to have problems identifying. Somebody will say, I'm 7. Maybe one of the few constituencies that they will have parliamentary candidates who will be their main campaign for the presidential candidate. They would have problems. Well, not everybody fulfilled all the 200 that the 2 big parties filled. So that is going to even make it worse. That's why today I've suggested that I'll be surprised if the total votes of all the 10 others, apart from NDC MPP, exceeds 4% on December 7th.
Yes, indeed. It's actually the headline, one of the major headlines on the front page of the Daily Dispatch. The total votes of the 10 other presidential candidates would not exceed 4%. That's an emphatic statement right there, Mr. Benevson.
Yes, they are not. Amavi, you are talking about, apart from, if you don't like MPP and NDC, going through 10 candidates. And like I said, your parliamentary, the 10 will have, they will have a sprinkling of parliamentary candidates. So if others are in between, maybe your candidate is number 4 and you are number 6, you're going to have a task. Oh, vote for my presidential candidate. He's at 3 or she's at 3, and vote for me, I'm at 6. Then we are going to have, this time, the rejected ballots, unofficial rejected ballots party is going to be very big, unfortunately.
All right. Mr. Benefson, stay with us. Let me bring Dr. Stephen Mahama Brima into the conversation. Dr. Brima, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Dr. Brima.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. What do you make of the various interpretations being put on the numbers already? We've heard there's the religious, the more... yesterday I heard about the 9 representing childbirth. That's even been put on a number already. But what do you make of the various things that have come up already?
Thank you. It's interesting listening and reading from various social commentators about the importance of the various numbers. The numbers in themselves do not really portend anything. The important thing about the numbers is what the various parties would use those numbers to do, to spin off, to market their candidates. That's what will be important as far as the numbers are concerned. I hear the Honorable Minister talking about the fact that because they are number 1, it's easier for them to be able to market themselves. So it is going to be depending on the various parties and what they use the numbers in order to be able to galvanize their support base. So I can see, for example, the NPP talking about we are number 1, and so we are the winners, we are top there. I can see NDC talking about we are number 2, and that's our second time of coming, so it's surety for us. So it is the spin that the parties put on the numbers that will have an impact on their base. But the numbers themselves are just numbers. That's what I believe.
Is that what the trend has been previously? Because there have been a few comparisons. There's been also the bit about even the National Science and Maths quiz being brought into this conversation. Some of the parties believe this has happened before. So the fact that I'm number 1 or I am number 2 means it's a done deal.
Yes, I read that. And you see, what happens is that in trying to market your candidate, you look for events and happenings and history that seems to portend positively for you and then bring that up. So if you look at the NDC case, what happened in 2008, PSEC winning the National Maths quiz, NPP picking number 1 and then going to lose the election, it seems the history is repeating itself. And so it means that for NDC, they will need to be able to get this information out there. Look, what happened in 2008 is happening again. And so it means that we are out there to be able to win the election. Now, this may have the psychological impact of galvanizing their supporters, and then probably those few sidelines who are yet not decided might look and say, oh yes, maybe it's a done deal, so let's go along with that. So this history repeating itself would only have an impact if the party is able to communicate that effectively and to get to their support base, and those other ones that have not yet made up their minds as to vote for A or B.
Honorable Obi Amwa in the studio, any thoughts in terms of what they shared with the strategies? It looks like you're good with the number 1.
Well, certainly, I think for any entity, when you ballot and you get number 1, you're happy with it. Number 1 is not an unlucky number in any way. There are some numbers which some may say are unlucky numbers, but not number 1.
But you would have loved number 4.
It would have sent the same message, 4 more to do more. In any case, we are not the only people looking for 4 more. Others are looking for 4 more, but we've managed to take over that slogan. So if we add the number 1 to the 4 more, we are good. 1 more term for Nana Akufo-Addo is number 1 touch. You can do all the permutations and we are cool with the number 1. Our Uncle Ben was talking about rejected ballots, etc. Of course, if you look at the results, usually rejected ballots are more than what the individual candidates get apart from MPP and NDC. If you look at 2016, the results are here. I just want you to go through it. you see the rejected the 1.54, which is more than the 0. Those percentages that the other candidates had. So,
well, it's just reiterating what he said in terms of the total rejected 1.54, and the number is 167,349.
Yes.
The total valid votes, which was over 10,000.
Yes.
Okay. So per what we've heard,
10 million.
10 million per what we've heard, this will be, the rejected ballots will even be a lot more because of the placements.
Well, we used to have a challenge with the ballot paper, but now there's a very thick line between the candidates. And for the EC, if for any reason the greater part of the thumb is in a particular box, it's counted as being for that particular candidate. So what we need to do is the more education. And some even advocate that instead of looking at the ballots in a straight way to tampering, turn the ballot so that you tamper against your candidate so that none of the ink will go into the next box for anybody to say that that ballot should be rejected. So it's all about education and then...
Yeah, but has that been decided in terms of how the ballot paper itself would look like?
The ballot paper always has those thick lines between boxes. So for any reason, if anybody should tamper and then the ink should go to the next box, because there are thick lines, unless the person doesn't know how to vote, which would then bring the rejected ballot because the person would then have voted for two candidates and to be rejected. But if the greater part of the thumb is in a particular box to be counted, and of course the challenge is that for most people they vote MPP, NDC. So if we were separated, it would have been easier than if we were together. But it's the same thing, because if you don't tamper well, if you don't vote well, no matter where the candidate is, it will be rejected. So the most critical thing is education as to how to even vote. But we take some of these things for granted, but people even don't know how to vote. That's how come we have rejected ballots, even though there are other reasons why a ballot may be rejected. For instance, if you write on the ballot paper, it will be rejected.
Let me just bring in Mr. Benefson on this particular issue of rejected ballots. What do we know has accounted for this in the past? Is it because people are simply confused, they don't know how to vote, or they really don't want to vote, so they just want to spoil the ballots?
I don't think that anybody would get around to spoil the ballot. Apart from the two big parties, the smaller parties, their main agents of campaign are their parliamentary candidates. And it makes it a bit confusing if not all the smaller parties filled in all the 200. So if your presidential candidate is in 4, that is in terms of the presidential ballot, and you, the parliamentary candidate, because the people have not filed well, number 3, you will tell your supporters, if you go, vote 3 for me and vote for the presidential candidate. You vote 3, then you go and vote. You say the person is different, so you've already voted for somebody else. Then you vote for the presidential candidate of the smaller party. That ballot is gone. So that is mainly the thing. And like Obi said, it's because the two parties are together. They will be together for all the 275 in presidential party. So they will not suffer so much rejected ballots in terms of confusion between the parliamentary and presidential placing. It is already smaller parties staffed of those who may suffer most. Because 12, I don't think that we've ever had 12. The biggest number, I think, has been 8 or has been 10. But 12 is going to be. Maybe Walker, the independent candidate down there, I don't think he will have any parliamentary candidate. So he may have a good campaign strategy of Aseho. And he may get a few votes, especially the one above him. So that is what I see. I mean, people are just a bit reckless, and I think that, like Obi's suggestion, if people will be asked to turn the ballot 5 days so that your thumb is more secured, it will reduce the rejected ballots. But the rejected ballots, even to the political party, Mamavi, it will always be listed.
But Dr. Brima, some people would also vote, even though they know how to vote, they would do it so that it will be rejected as a form of protest.
Mama, is it me?
No, I was directing that at Dr. Brima.
Okay.
Okay, so we all often hear there's people saying that they go in to have protest vote, and so they vote in such a way that they waste their votes. And without any empirical evidence, I could summarize that that would be a very small number. I think the bigger number of rejected votes would be people who have really either they're in a hurry or they're not really used to voting. And so at the end of the day, what they wanted to say has not actually been said. And that is worrying because this is a democratic practice. You expect to factor in everybody who is qualified to vote and ready to vote. You want to factor in their opinion as to who should be the next leader. And so when you walk in there and you vote and your vote is not counted because it's a spoiled ballot or rejected ballot, it's worrying. And I think that with this one, the Electoral Commission and the National Commission for Civil Education has a lot to do so that we can actually educate the voters very well, so that when they get in there, we have very few spoiled ballots. Because sometimes when I look at the percentage of the spoiled ballot that comes, the NFC says it's normally the third political party. Yes. So it tells you that they can make or unmake a particular candidate or candidates. And so I think it behoves on all the institutions and also particularly the political parties that are participating in this election process to educate the voters so well that when they get in there, they are able to take their time and they're able to place their thumbprint properly and squarely on the people they're voting for. And I think that sometimes the problem also comes from how they fold it. Even though every election cycle, people are taught how to fold. I think education is not getting down too well. So if you don't fold it properly, you realize that your thumbprint will then go down and then go and affect somebody else. So I think that even folding the ballot box, the ballot paper too, is critical. And so we need a lot of education in this one so we can factor everybody's opinion into the democratic process.
Okay, so with that said, let's talk about timing. And I raised the issue of, because the balloting has been done very quickly, right after the confirmation of the candidates, Honorable Obiamwa, is that time for grievances to be addressed? Because I remember when Dr. Papa Kwesi Ndum went to court, there was an injunction on the balloting, which meant that there was a bit of time, but now it's been closed.
No, not at all. When Papa Kwesi Ndum went to court, and the court ordered that the EC should allow candidates to make corrections on the mistakes, if it's not forgery or the dubious document, but for just mistakes, the EC should allow them to correct them. We ended up in November. So if anybody wants to go to court now, with the Supreme Court decisions and the precedent, you don't go and waste everybody's time in the High Court. The EC will come in and say that let the Supreme Court take up this matter. The Supreme Court will then give orders that do it this way, mindful of the fact that we have to print the ballot papers and then vote on 7 December. So there's still time. Anybody who thinks that he's been disqualified can still go to court. But as you said, because now we've balloted, it makes it a bit more complicated. But they still have to go to court. But I wanted to come back to a few things that Ben and our friend, the lecturer, said. We should distinguish between spoiled ballots and rejected ballots. Spoiled ballot is when you're given the ballot and then for any reason it's spoiled. You go back, they'll give you another ballot to go and vote. Maybe ink would have spilled on it. Maybe by the time you were holding it, you
so this is before you even make the attempt to vote. And
you are entitled to go for another one. But for rejected, you've voted. After voting, there's that issue that it cannot be counted because you've either voted for 2 people or for whatever reason, if there's a mark on it or you didn't vote at all those things will count. Then we should also take note of the fact that somebody may have a presidential candidate. I will not have a parliamentary candidate. So if you come to my constituency, if you are PPP, your presidential candidate is number 10, but you don't have a parliamentary candidate. So you may say that, okay, I vote number 10, but I'll go and vote for number 1, which will be me. And that would not be a rejected ballot. And that would not confuse anybody. There are situations to where, assuming PPP had failed in my constituency, PPP would have been number 3. In which case, they have 10 for presidential candidate and 3 for parliamentary. That's where the campaigning becomes a bit more difficult. That vote for 10 and vote for 3. So but at the end of the day, voting for different persons at the presidential and parliamentary will not make it rejected. Except that if that's not a wish, that means the person has been confused by the positioning and everything. That's what I wanted to just bring it.
Great. And Mr. Benefson, I want to ask about the issues that Peter Otokno raised at the beginning of the balloting, and if you think, there's something relevant in there that we should pay attention to in terms of helping the whole exercise being a lot more transparent.
Thank you, Mama. I watched the processes and I didn't really get a grasp of what Otokno meant. Because the balls were there, you go in and you pick to get the order of picking. So coming there to write and fold and put it in, you are going to get a situation where you are going to waste a lot of time on it. So I didn't actually get the drift of what he was saying, to be honest with you. I felt that there have been instances that people may disagree, but I didn't actually get the drift. Perhaps you felt that the EC should have stuck to the same, perhaps, way that they do it. But this is not football that you can have hot or cold balls to pick. During the FIFA scandal, they said to avoid big clubs, some of the balls were heated, so you don't take it. So perhaps I felt that perhaps it was part of their displeasure with the EC as a whole, in terms that you can see that perhaps every step the EC has taken, the NDC have had issues. So, well, perhaps this may have been, but if honestly, I tell you that I had a grasp of what you were saying, I did not. I felt that perhaps it was a storm in a teacup.
Can I get your thoughts on this? Maybe there was something that you saw, Dr. Brima, that you think is relevant enough for us to pay attention to. He wanted the writing of the numbers to be policed, if you like. There should be agents, and he was citing the fact that they also carry out exercises like that, and they do it.
I think that if you watch the process, you will realize that at the end of the day, because there were 2 processes, one to ballot for who to come when to ballot for the position on the presidential ticket, it actually meant that because the processes were 2, it would be difficult for anybody to actually manipulate it. And at the end of the day, the 2 biggest parties seem to be very happy with where they have. NPP is happy they are in number 1. They're talking about one more term for Nana. NDC is happy they're in number 2. They are talking of second coming of John Mahama. So it looks like at the end of the day, the parties are actually happy with what they got. So I didn't really observe any particular infringement or any particular challenge with the process that is worth probably talking about. But because he was there, maybe there was something else he saw that we did not see. But standing outside and watching, I thought that at the end of the day, it worked out fine for all the parties involved.
Let me get your thoughts, and I'll start with Mr. Benefson, also about the timing of the processes. With the new register, one of the concerns, especially with COVID, was the timing. Now we're in October, and we've even done the balloting. Where does this leave us? Does this give us more time? It looks like it gives us a lot more time for the candidates to even do a good job with selling themselves.
EC has done very well within the time frame getting a new register. I think that if we had used the old register, would have had perhaps excess of 2 million more people. I think that they've gotten their act together. He's done very, very well. And as you can see, the balloting has been done. There are dates, one, to take care of any potential legal redress that the Supreme Court may order, if any. And yes, to give the candidates more time. So I think that the EC has done very well within the circumstances. There may be a few pitfalls, but to now, towards between now and the elections, I think that I'll give them an A for the processes and the time frame. I mean, getting the new register Mamavi was Herculean, but they've done well.
That's a very generous A you give them.
Oh, you know, I've been involved in elections at least closely from the Fourth Republic. You know, if you look at the population census, many of the people are below 50 years. You don't remember anything. In 1992, the ballot box was not transparent. And where I voted, I was the 8th person. When I was going to vote, the ballot box was full. We had, in 1992, we had parliamentary fairs, then we had presidential fairs, then parliamentary, then people boycotted. From 96, we moved on to voting for the two on the same day. Ballot boxes became transparent. A lot has gone, and I know the processes and the problems. And I've been generous because, to be honest, I was a bit apathetic. I was a bit scared if they would finish all the processes ahead of time to give room for any legal disruptions. That is why I've been very generous that they've really done well with the timing, and they had just enough time for campaigning and enough time to remedy any situation that any legal challenge may order at the Supreme Court.
Let me come to you, Mr. Obiamo, in terms of the calendar where we are. You've talked about it, and I will spend a bit of time with the issue that you're raising with education.
Yes.
What else do we have? Where do we move from where we are after balloting? What next?
Well, if you look at the CI 127, the critical thing is the filing of nomination. When you conclude that process, for us as political parties, we need to train our agents, because there's a time within which you have to submit a list of agents for EC to give them accreditation. And these are the persons who represent the party at the polling station level. At the EC level, they have in place the returning officers, but they have to recruit presiding officers. Presiding officers are those who will be in charge of the process at the polling station. They will be in charge of everything. The returning officer is the one at the center. He's in charge of the whole constituency, but he presides at the collation center. For presidential, of course, is the EC boss, the Electoral Commission chair. So for the EC, they are following the calendar. The most critical thing, even after the balloting, barring any legal issues, is to get the ballot papers printed. You have to print the ballot papers, carry them, transport them to the places, get their machines ready for verification, etc. But the critical thing is the education. They have a whole, if you pick 2016, they had a guide to voters, how the voters should know the process, conduct, the way you vote.
Do you know whether or not we'll have something like this year?
It should be an obligation. They are obliged to produce these things. You have even one, two like this. And these are critical things that I believe that the media should also look at, so that in your discussions, we also find time to educate the average voter. There are a lot of things that you expect the average voter to know, but he might not know. So for instance, if anybody should advise you that I want to know whether you vote for me because I don't trust you. So when they give the ballot paper, write your name there. It's rather making sure that your vote will be negated. So never put any mark on the ballot paper. And you train agents, fine, but you should be able to also tell the electorate, the average voter, that these are things that you can do, these are things that you can't do, these are things that can nullify your vote, these are things that can even put you in trouble as far as the laws are concerned. And the time may be short, but it's very critical that we look at those things. So for the EC, they are on course, in spite of all the problems that they've had, court cases, COVID, the demonstrations, late registration, but they've come very far. But there's still a lot of work for them to do, because for presiding, you have to even publish those you are appointing, for the parties to have enough notice, and for parties to object to any appointment you've made, you have to sit on the objection, adjudicate, and then come out to confirm whether this person is very well known in a particular constituency as a party activist, so he can be your official. And for them, I will also advise that they need to train their officers very well. They shouldn't take it for granted, because for registration, you have a period. For elections, it's only a one-day matter. If your officials mess up, they mess you up, because then the legal issues will come in, court cases, etc. And sometimes they admit that they were at fault. The famous case, I also West Wagon. Just transposition. They gave the results of Azikamo to Rebecca Adote. And when they went to court, they admitted. But it took 4 years for the court to determine it. So most critical things, the recruitment of the officers for the job, training of them, and then making sure that on election day, they don't compromise. They perform very well and then don't get compromised in any way, which would then put the EC in trouble. Because most of the time, the people they even recruit are not permanent staff. You understand? They are not permanent. As for permanent staff, you can be sanctioned because you are permanent and may lose your job, etc. But these people are recruited for that exercise, and then you pay them for being part of it. If they mess you up, they mess the whole EC up, but they are gone. Even though when it comes to the legal side, they can't be prosecuted. So there's still work for EC to do, but we all need to help them to be able to do it so that we have very credible elections, a transparent one as such.
Mr. Benefson, it looks like we have a lot of work, and when I say we, the media, but one would also think that because we've carried out these exercises for quite some time now, we don't have to do as intensive a job. Everybody should know the basic things by now. You should know how to vote.
Well, for example, you got the EC data on new voters register. There are 1.3 million
First-time
voters, 18, 19-year-olds who have now voted. So there's a huge number of voters out there who can make a difference, who need to be taught. And I have some free advice for the political parties. You know, EC on election years engages private people, about 100,000 people, and the presiding and returning officers, Mama, the names are published for the political parties to look through that, oh, Mr. A in this constituency is a known figure. My advice to the political parties is to circulate all the names among all their people, because I've realized over years that if somebody is well known in Ablekuma Central constituency, for example, he will apply to be a presiding or a returning officer in Orodo. Because when the list comes, the political parties will give the names of those who've been at Ablekuma Central to their officials or party agents in Ablekuma Central to check whether the name there is somebody who is known. I think that in the region, they should circulate all the names to all the executives of the various constituencies to be able to point that look, I know of this person, even though I know this person at my center, to avoid what they say. You know, the human head is round. You cannot know what's inside the head. These are some of the things that will help improve efficiency. That when you object, then you have basis for objecting to make the processes on December 7th free and fair.
Dr. Barima, I'm passionate about the women who have made it onto the ballot this year. There are 3 women. There's number 5, number 10, and number 11. Are these favorable numbers? Would it be easier? You know, can they do good marketing with where they are placed?
Yes, they can. You need to have well-seasoned and experienced political marketers to actually help you use the numbers that you are falling into to market yourself. Yes, they can, and especially because they are ladies. And you know, over the years, we have been crying that we need to have a lot more female participation at the top level of our political exercises. And so this time, I think this is the time we have our 3 women at the top. And so just the fact that there are women there, that already gives them a leverage that they can use. That is one. Number 2, the number that that are attached to that position that they have picked, they can equally use that as well. The idea always is that you want to get the people who want to support you to know exactly where your number is placed. Because see, you got into the ballot booth and you are looking at 12 names and you have to look through. Apart from the bigger ones that are well known and that are at this time all at the top, it means that you need to be looking through to identify whether or not you can identify your person. Sometimes people are not even able to identify the photos. And if you can also read, which is the case with some of our voters, then how do you actually read who the name? So the issue is that the symbol must be well known, the number must also be well known. In fact, and your photographs must also be well known. And if you do this, it could actually bring the people that hope to vote for you. The challenge they actually have is that over the years, you see that people tend to vote mostly in MPP NDC. So what it means is that it's a small number of voters who tend to vote for the other parties. And this year, the other parties are a lot. So what it means is that they may tend to share a lot more of the other votes. And so they may not really get much, but they can't sit on their horse. They will need to make a very serious attempt to make their presence felt. And so they can't do that.
Mr. Benefson, if you look at the 2016 election, even though generally in Ghana there are more women, more men took part in that exercise. The fact that we have 3 women on the ballots, do you think that would account for more women showing up to vote, even if not necessarily voting for them?
Amami, can I be blunt?
Yes, sir, as always.
In 2016, we had the first ever woman presidential candidate, Nana Konadu, and she did not get 17,000 votes. In percentage terms, he got 0.16%. It's unfortunate that I think that a presidential candidate will need to be propelled by a strong party. The NDP is rather young, and I don't think that women will go and vote for a woman candidate necessarily. It's going to be very difficult. In 20 years of polling, the only person before elections that we had done some work who would have done well as an independent candidate was the late Kofi Annan when he was exiting. But since then, the trend has been the same. And unfortunately, we have 3 women. Perhaps the battle for the one of the 3 would be between the PPP and NDP. They have the local for PPP and another project for NDP. In 2016, Dr. Indom did well of the smaller parties. He got 0.99%. So if that goodwill is still going to be there, that is going to be between the 2. But unfortunately, we've not gotten to the stage where a woman will vote for a woman because the person is a woman. I don't think we've gotten to that stage yet.
Interesting. Would you want to add your voice to that? Would we see the fact that we have more women showing up to vote?
In our campaigns, at least what we've seen so far, it appears more women turn out to come and listen to us. They dominate, for whatever reason. They seem to show interest in what we are doing. And of course, they come with their own...
They make the campaigns also very colorful.
Very colorful. They like dancing a lot. They sing along. And of course, they come because they have issues. We want loans. Environment is this. They come because they have issues. What then is critical is for the parties to be able to get them to go and vote. If you do house to house and you go and meet the ladies, they tell you their problems, you become familiar with them. On election day, you should be able to convince them that go and queue and vote. That's how you'll be able to get your problems solved. So if you look at the statistics, as you said, if it's below 50%, even though there are more than men below 50% who went to vote, then they should be encouraged to go and vote, irrespective of the fact that the person will still want to go to the market to go and sell her wares. And if it's going to waste her time, she may say that today is market day, I need to go, I may not, or I'll go and come back, never turns up. So we need to encourage women to vote and vote massively so that at least the impact will be felt. And for us, when you talked about the balloting, the other aspect is that once we know where we are now, we are going to do dummy ballots. We're going to print dummy ballots, just put our candidate and the symbol and then how to vote. Going around
in educating the people.
Educating them and then making them aware that when it comes to the time, this is how we will expect you to vote. So what we do is to put the candidate's picture, their symbol, and the box, and the rest we leave it blank. We do something dark to show that we are not interested in all those other candidates. So this is how the ballot will be. So when you go, this is how we expect you to vote. It's all part of education, it's all part of the campaigning. Yes.
Just your last thoughts on this, Dr. Brima. How else do you think that the education should be done this year?
Well, I think the parties should get involved and get involved big time. They don't only need to train their polling agents, they actually need to communicate right to the grassroots and let the people know how voting is going to be done. Like Obi is saying, they are going to embark on a strategy to indicate their people as to how to vote. And that is also a strategy of campaigning as well as not just education. I think the other parties should also take a cue from that and then decide how they're going to approach their grassroots voters and let them understand how to vote. Because for me, the how to vote is very critical because the guy goes there, he queues for 2 hours, 3 hours, he goes there and then he has no vote. His ballot is rejected. He doesn't even know. He thinks he has taken part in decision making, but he hasn't actually taken part in any decision making. And so the parties should get down to the rules and don't take anything for granted. Get the people to understand how to vote, and not just how to vote, but also turn out to vote. Because when the turnout is high, then we are sure that whoever gets the mandate actually has the mandate of the people.
Dr. Brima, thank you very much for your time. Mr. Benefsing, I want to ask you this. Before the registration exercise, we had lots of people say, oh, I'm not interested because of COVID, I'm not going to show up to register. But in the end, we know quite a good number showed up to register. Same with the exercise itself in terms of voting. Has there been, yesterday, listening and watching, there seemed to be a lot of attention paid to the balloting. Do you feel that the buzz is on, so that on December 7, those who even said, oh, they're not interested in voting will show up to vote?
Yes. I mean, the trend since 1992, Mamavi, had been that anytime there's a change in government, the turnout is low, and the election thereafter has a very high turnout. I think that the decision of the AC, normally the polling stations, they peg it that in excess of 1,000, they create a new polling station. This time, they brought it down to 700. So I'm sure people who are afraid of COVID, the 700 should be able to make them. I mean, when they go and there are huge crowds, they may decide to turn away. But the 700 per polling station, if we take average of even 70% turnout, that should ease people's fears about COVID. And I don't think that we should have a process. The EC must come clear because we need to be careful that an overzealous election official might insist that if you don't have a mask, you will not allow you to vote. So that is a crucial area. All stakeholders must agree that if we are going to vote, if we don't have a mask, will you be allowed to vote? We need to clarify this to avoid election day wahala problems. Somebody saying that somebody went to vote. So that is an issue that needs to be cleared with all stakeholders, Mamavi.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Benefsing, for your thoughts and for spending time with us here on the AM show. Really grateful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Ms. Obiamwa, just the last leg of this, and let's build up from where Mr. Bennett Singh left off in terms of the COVID protocols. Yes. You go to IPAC meetings.
Yes.
Is this scheduled for, do we know what's going to happen on the day itself in terms of?
Well, the first thing we need to address our minds to is the law itself. Are we supposed to wear masks
but are we
in
even
public?
using the law?
No,
What's the last time somebody was arrested?
Are we supposed to wear masks in public places? If the law is still there, that means that you're supposed to comply with the law. For us as a political party, we want to make sure that our followers will go and vote for us. So we are even making room for the protocols. Nobody should give an excuse that I'm not going to the place because I don't have a mask. We will produce a mask for you. And
so your agents would have masks at the centers to give to those who would come.
Yes, or even those coming from home. If we get prompters, people to go and convince them, yes, it's time for voting, go and vote. On the way, we say that you need a mask. If you don't have this, a mask for you. So we are investing in those things. It didn't happen in 2016, but these are the times. And we expect the EC2 to talk about the social distancing and all those things. We all have to be part of it. But the most important thing is to observe the protocols and also assure people that you can go and vote and you don't have any problem. If they think that going to vote will get them infected or anything, then it means we have a problem. And we want to take part in solving that problem by investing in these sanitizers and face masks and anything that will make the average voter comfortable to go and vote for the results to be declared. So we have IPAC and we have DIPAC. The IPAC, that means at the district level. The parties also meet at the district level. They meet at the national level. And we need to agree some of these things. Maybe the most extreme would be where you'll be driven away that without a mask you can't vote. That would be extreme. And we need to address those
Would
things.
it be extreme?
It would, because the person will say that you've denied him the right to determine who should lead us, even though it's an offense not to wear a mask in public and even at such gatherings. So that's why I'm saying that trying to mitigate it would mean that we should have a way of providing those things for them. If a voter comes and doesn't have, you should give him a mask before he goes to vote.
But at least for the political parties, the terms have not been agreed.
No,
we know the law. You've talked about what
we
the law
haven't
says,
met at IPAC for the AC to insist on this, for the AC to remind us that it's part of the law. We haven't met at that stage. And for the AC to even say that we will take part of the investment, you have masks ready at the polling center. If anybody appears without mask, we will let the person wear a mask before he goes to vote. EC can take that upon itself, like what they did for registration. And then the parties too have to invest in that so that we don't have issues with COVID even at this time. Because there's a second wave around the world and we seem to have escaped. And it's not by magic, because we did a lot of work to get to this point. And we don't need to do anything that will make us suffer for it. Can imagine that if we had lost about 20,000 people or 50,000 people going into elections, there will be fear and panic. But the number, even though very unfortunate, is quite low, and people are a bit confident to go to places, except that me at my community gatherings, when I get there, first thing I look at is, are they wearing face masks? So I ask my handlers, why are they not wearing face masks? If there's some in the car, give to everybody. But I don't want to be pictured addressing people who are not observing the protocols. It defeats the purpose. So I always carry these things along and say that distribute to them. So we are investing so much in face masks, but it's the price we have to pay at this time for the campaign.
Well, thank you very much this morning for the thoughts that you also share with us. And that's where we end AM Talk for today.